Introduction to her perfect life. Emily Carter was the kind of woman people envied. At just 30, she had built a thriving career, married a man who adored her, and lived in a luxurious home that seemed straight out of a magazine. From the outside, everything about her life appeared flawless. She was the definition of success, elegance, and happiness. Her morning started with a perfect routine: a cup of imported coffee on her sunlit balcony, followed by a brisk workout before heading to her high-profile job as a marketing executive at one of the top firms in the city. She had worked hard to get here, overcoming obstacles with resilience and determination. People admired her confidence, her charm, and her ability to stay composed under pressure. In her personal life, Emily had what seemed like the perfect relationship. Her husband, Daniel, was a successful lawyer, handsome, intelligent, and deeply in love with her. They were the couple everyone aspired to be, often featured in social gatherings, charity events, and even lifestyle magazines. They took extravagant vacations, hosted elegant dinner parties, and shared sweet, candid moments on social media that made people believe in fairy tales. But beneath the surface, cracks were beginning to form. Tiny, almost imperceptible at first. Emily sometimes felt a strange unease, a nagging feeling she couldn't quite shake. There were moments when Daniel would avoid certain questions, or suddenly change the subject when she brought up topics from the past. A few times, she had noticed a shadow pass over his face when she mentioned their future. But she dismissed it. After all, no one's life was completely perfect. At work, she was respected and admired, but there were whispers behind her back. She occasionally caught colleagues exchanging knowing glances when she walked into the room. Emails mysteriously disappeared from her inbox, and once, a file she had been working on for weeks was suddenly deleted. She chalked it up to technical glitches and office politics, but deep inside, something felt off. Even at home, small but odd incidents began to pile up. A letter with no sender's name arrived, containing just 3 words: "You don't know." Her social media accounts were being accessed from unknown locations, and someone had even tried to reset her passwords. Then there was the phone call, one she would never forget. A blocked number, a voice distorted by static, whispering, "It's time you learned the truth." Emily had spent years building her perfect life. But what if it was all built on lies? What if the success she worked so hard for wasn't hers alone? And what if the man she loved wasn't the person she thought he was? She brushed off the paranoia, convincing herself she was overthinking. But deep down, she knew something was coming, something that would shatter everything she believed in. She had no idea that her life was about to change forever. Mysterious signs and red flags. At first, the signs were small, so insignificant that Emily barely noticed them. A misplaced document at work, a text message that vanished before she could read it, a strange look from a colleague when she entered the office. She told herself it was nothing. She was busy, overworked, and maybe a little paranoid. But as the days passed, the feeling of unease grew stronger. She began to notice people whispering when she walked by. Conversations would abruptly stop when she entered the room, replaced by awkward silence and forced smiles. Her assistant, Megan, who had always been warm and friendly, suddenly became distant, avoiding eye contact and keeping their interactions strictly professional. It was as if people knew something she didn't. Then there were the documents. Files that should have been on her desk were gone without a trace. She would spend hours searching for reports she had just seen the day before, only to find them later, moved, altered, or sometimes completely erased from her system. When she asked the IT department, they insisted there had been no unusual activity on her account. But she knew better. Someone was tampering with her work. At home, the strange occurrences continued. A framed photograph of her and Daniel fell from the mantel one evening, shattering into pieces. She dismissed it as an accident, but when she went to clean up the mess, she noticed something chilling. The frame had been carefully placed back together before breaking again, as if someone had already handled it before she arrived. Her phone became another source of unease. Late at night, she received calls from unknown numbers. When she answered, there was nothing but silence. Once, She heard faint breathing on the other end before the call abruptly disconnected. She tried blocking the numbers, but new ones kept appearing. And then there were the emails, cryptic messages with subject lines like, "You need to see the truth," or "Do you really know him?" But when she clicked on them, they disappeared, leaving no trace in her inbox. The final straw came one evening when she stepped out of a cafe and felt a pair of eyes watching her. She turned around, but the busy street was filled with strangers, none of whom seemed out of place. Still, the sensation didn't fade. That night, as she sat in her car, she caught a glimpse of a figure in the rearview mirror, standing across the street, motionless, staring directly at her. When she blinked, they were gone. Emily tried to rationalize everything: stress, exhaustion, maybe even an overactive imagination. But deep down, she knew better. These weren't coincidences. Someone was watching her. Someone wanted her to feel afraid. And the worst part? She had no idea why. A hidden past uncovered. Emily had always believed she knew who she was. She had grown up in a loving home, worked hard to build her career, and created a life that many envied. But as the strange occurrences around her intensified, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing, some crucial piece of her own story that had been hidden from her. Then one night, everything changed. It started with an old, tattered envelope left on her doorstep. There was no return address, no name, just her first name scrawled in uneven handwriting. Her hands trembled as she picked it up, a deep sense of unease settling over her. She tore it open, revealing a single photograph and a yellowed newspaper clipping. The photo was old, black and white, showing a little girl, about 4 or 5 years old, clutching a stuffed bear. The girl's eyes were hauntingly familiar. They were Emily's. But she had no memory of this picture, no recollection of the stuffed bear or the unfamiliar setting in the background. Her heart pounded as she turned to the newspaper clipping. The headline sent a chill down her spine. "Missing child found, but where are her real parents?" Her breath caught. She scanned the article, her mind struggling to process the words. A young girl, approximately 4 years old, was discovered wandering alone near a gas station on the outskirts of town late last night. Authorities have yet to identify her real parents. Witnesses claim the child was visibly distressed but unable to recall how she got there. An ongoing investigation is underway to determine her identity and locate her missing family. Emily's stomach twisted. The article was dated nearly 30 years ago, around the time she would have been that age. She flipped the photo over, her fingers trembling. A single sentence was scribbled in ink. "You were never meant to know." Her vision blurred as she tried to make sense of it all. Could this be a mistake? A cruel joke? Her parents had never mentioned anything like this. They had always told her she was their only child, that she had grown up in their loving care. But if this article was real, if the little girl in the photo was really her, then who were they? A sickening realization washed over her. Had her entire life been built on a lie? Desperate for answers, she called her mother, her voice shaking. "Mom, I need to ask you something. It's important." There was a long pause before her mother finally spoke. "Emily, whatever you found, you need to leave it alone." Her heart dropped. That wasn't denial. That was fear. And in that moment, Emily knew, whatever secret had been buried in her past, it was never meant to be uncovered. But it was too late. She had found the truth, and now someone was making sure she regretted it. The betrayal of a trusted one. Emily couldn't shake the feeling that her entire life had been a carefully constructed illusion. The old photograph, the missing child article, her mother's fearful warning, it all pointed to something far bigger than she could comprehend. And now, the most terrifying question lingered in her mind. Who had been lying to her all these years? Determined to uncover the truth, she started digging. She searched through old family albums, rifled through birth certificates, and even called distant relatives. But every trail led to a dead end. It was as if her early childhood had been deliberately erased. The unease in her gut grew stronger. Someone knew. Someone had always known. Then, one evening, the truth found her. She was sitting in her dimly lit living room, staring at the mysterious photograph, when her phone buzzed. It was a text. No name, just a number she didn't recognize. "Meet me at Ridgewood Cafe. 9 p.m. You need answers. Come alone." Her pulse quickened. She hesitated, but curiosity and desperation won over fear. She arrived at the cafe early, choosing a table in the corner, her heart hammering as she waited. And then, the last person she ever expected walked in. Megan, her assistant, her friend, someone she had trusted for years. Megan sat across from her, eyes darting around the cafe, before finally locking onto Emily's. She looked pale, nervous, like someone carrying a secret too heavy to bear. "I didn't want you to find out this way," Megan said, voice barely above a whisper. Emily's hands clenched under the table. "Find out what?" Megan took a deep breath. "I've known for a while, about your past, about who you really are." A chill ran down Emily's spine. "You knew?" Her voice cracked. "And you never told me?" Megan looked away. "I wanted to, but I was told not to." "Told?" Emily's mind raced. "By who?" Megan swallowed hard. "Your parents." Emily felt like the air had been sucked from the room. The people she had loved, trusted, the ones who had raised her, had been lying to her all along. "You weren't supposed to find out," Megan continued. "They didn't want you to know that they weren't your real parents." Emily's stomach twisted. The article was real. The photo was real. Her childhood had been stolen, rewritten. "Why?" Her voice was barely a whisper. Megan hesitated before finally speaking. "Because they weren't the ones who took you in." She looked Emily straight in the eye. "They were the ones who took you." Emily's blood ran cold. Her entire life had been built on a lie, and the people she loved most were the ones who had stolen her from the truth. The moment of exposure. Emily had spent days drowning in a storm of betrayal, confusion, and unanswered questions. Megan's confession had shattered the foundation of her life. Her parents weren't her real parents. They had taken her, but why? And from who? She needed answers. Desperate, she confronted her mother again, demanding the truth. But the moment she uttered the words, her mother's face drained of color. "Emily, please. You don't understand. We did it to protect you." But protect her from what? The answer came faster than she expected, and in the most brutal way possible. That evening, Emily sat in her car outside her childhood home, trying to process the impossible. Her hands trembled as she scrolled through the photograph, the newspaper clipping, and the cryptic messages she had received. She had to find the truth herself. But before she could take another breath, her phone buzzed. A notification. It wasn't a text. It was a news alert. Her heart stopped as she read the headline. "Breaking: Missing child case reopened after shocking leak. A stolen life?" Emily's blood ran cold. Shaking, she clicked on the link, and her worst nightmare unfolded in real time. The article laid out everything: the missing child case from 30 years ago, the photo, the mysterious adoption records that had been altered, and most chillingly, her name, her face, her story. It was all over the internet. News stations had picked it up. Social media was exploding. The secret her parents had tried to bury was now exposed to the world. Her phone wouldn't stop ringing. Calls from reporters, emails from strangers claiming they knew her past, comments flooding in. Some people sympathized with her. Others accused her parents of kidnapping. Some even questioned whether Emily herself had been involved in covering it up. She gasped for air as the truth hit her in full force. This wasn't just her battle anymore. The entire world knew. And whoever had leaked this? They wanted her to suffer. But one question still remained. Who had exposed it? And more importantly, why now? Public backlash and chaos. Emily had thought the worst was over when the truth came out. She was wrong. The morning after the story broke, She woke up to find her world completely changed. Her phone was still buzzing nonstop, calls from unknown numbers, messages from reporters demanding an interview, and emails filled with accusations and sympathy in equal measure. Stepping outside was impossible. News vans were parked in front of her apartment. Cameras flashed the moment she peeked through her window. Strangers were screaming questions she had no answers to. Emily, did your parents really kidnap you? Do you remember your real family? Are you pressing charges? Her workplace was no refuge either. By the time she arrived, security had to escort her through a swarm of journalists. Inside, whispers filled the hallways. Colleagues who once greeted her with warm smiles now avoided her eyes. Some looked at her with pity, others with suspicion. At lunch, she overheard them talking. I heard she always had a strange past. What if she knew all along? Can we even trust her anymore? Her stomach twisted. These were people she had known for years. And now, they acted as if she were a stranger. The worst part was social media. Her name was trending worldwide. Every detail of her life was being dissected. Strangers were making assumptions about her. Some called her a victim, a girl whose life had been stolen. Others labeled her a fraud, accusing her of benefiting from a crime. The worst were the threats. Anonymous messages flooded her inbox. You don't deserve the life you have. Go back to where you belong. People like you should disappear. Then, an email arrived with no sender, no subject, just a single line. You were warned. Emily's breath caught. This wasn't just about the past anymore. Someone wanted to destroy her, and the more she searched for the truth, the worse things became. Her bank account was frozen due to identity concerns. Her landlord sent an eviction notice, and then Megan, the only person who had told her the truth, stopped answering her calls. It felt like the entire world had turned against her, and she still had no idea who had exposed the truth, or why now. All she knew was that whoever had done this wasn't finished yet. A dangerous threat emerges. Emily had lost control of her life. The public backlash, the whispers at work, the strangers dissecting her past, it was overwhelming. But beneath the chaos, something far more sinister lurked. The secret of her past wasn't just shocking, it was dangerous. It started with small warnings. The cryptic email, "You were warned." The anonymous phone calls, silent, except for the sound of breathing on the other end. Her apartment, once a place of safety, now felt like a trap. She swore she heard footsteps outside her door at night, a shadow moving in the hallway when no one should be there. Then, things escalated. One evening, she returned home to find her front door slightly open. Her hands trembled as she stepped inside. The lights were still off. Everything seemed untouched. But then she noticed it. Her laptop was gone. Papers from her desk had been rifled through, and on her mirror, written in red marker, "Stop digging." A chill ran down her spine. Someone had been in her home. She rushed to call the police, but they were dismissive. There's no sign of forced entry. Are you sure you didn't leave the door unlocked? The officer's tone was polite, but skeptical. To them, she was just another woman caught in a media storm, maybe paranoid, maybe seeking attention. But Emily knew the truth. Someone was watching her, someone who wanted to make sure she didn't uncover everything. She reached out to Megan again, desperate for more answers. But when Megan finally picked up, her voice was shaking. "Emily, I can't talk. I shouldn't have told you anything." Emily's heart pounded. "Megan, please. Who are they? What aren't you telling me?" A long silence. Then, in a hushed, terrified voice, Megan whispered, "They're still out there, and they don't want you to remember." The call ended abruptly. Emily stared at her phone, her hands ice cold. Who were they? What was she not supposed to remember? And just how far would someone go to keep the truth buried? A desperate struggle for redemption. Emily had spent weeks drowning in fear, betrayal, and unanswered questions. But fear could only control her for so long. Whoever was trying to silence her had made one mistake, underestimating her resolve. She wasn't going to be a victim anymore. She was going to fight back. Her first step was was to track down the truth on her own terms. If she couldn't trust the police, the media, or even the people she once called family, she needed to find allies elsewhere. She started with the missing child case. She scoured online archives, searching for records from 30 years ago. The original investigation had gone cold, but there were inconsistencies, witness testimonies that didn't match, evidence that had mysteriously vanished. Then she found something chilling: a second missing child case. A boy, around the same age, who had disappeared just a few months before her. And just like her case, the records were incomplete. This wasn't just about her. There were others. She reached out to an investigative journalist, Rachel Mendez, a woman known for exposing corruption. At first, Rachel was hesitant, skeptical of Emily's claims. But when Emily showed her the altered records and the threats she had received, Rachel's expression changed. "Someone went to great lengths to cover this up," she said. "And if they're still watching you, it means they have something to lose." With Rachel's help, Emily traced the adoption records back to a private organization, one with deep connections and a history of facilitating illegal adoptions. They weren't just hiding stolen children, they were selling them. The more they uncovered, the more dangerous things became. Rachel's car was vandalized. Emily's emails were hacked. Strangers followed her on the ultimate showdown. Emily had spent weeks running, uncovering secrets and watching her world crumble. But now, everything led to this moment. The threats, the missing documents, the media frenzy, someone had orchestrated all of it. Someone had wanted the truth to come out, but only on their terms. And now, she was about to face them. With Rachel's help, she traced the source of the leak, the threats, and even the video of her parents held hostage. Every digital trail, every anonymous tip led back to one person, someone she never expected. Megan. Emily's breath hitched as she stared at the address Rachel had found, a secluded warehouse on the edge of town. This was where her parents were being held. And Megan was behind it all? It didn't make sense. Megan had been scared, terrified even. She had helped Emily. She had been her only ally. Had it all been a lie? There was only one way to find out. The confrontation. Emily arrived at the warehouse just after midnight. The air was thick with tension. Rachel waited outside in her car, ready to call for backup if things went wrong. Inside, the dim lights flickered, casting eerie shadows across the cold cement floor. And there, in the center of the room, sat her parents, bound, gagged, their eyes wide with fear, and standing over them was Megan. Emily's heart pounded. "Megan?" Her voice was a mix of shock and betrayal. You did all of this?" Megan turned, her expression unreadable. "I did what had to be done." Emily took a step closer, fists clenched. "You leaked my story. You turned my life into a nightmare. And now this? Why?" Megan sighed, as if exhausted. Then she pulled something from her pocket, a small, crumpled photograph. Emily's stomach dropped. It was the same black and white photo of her as a child, the one she had found in the mysterious envelope. But this time, there was another child in the picture, a boy, the missing boy from the second case. Megan's voice was raw with emotion. "You weren't the only one they took, Emily." Emily's mind reeled. "What are you talking about?" Megan clenched her jaw. "The adoption ring, the people who sold you to your parents, they didn't just take you, they took others, including my brother." A cold wave of realization hit Emily. Megan's brother was the other missing child. Tears welled in Megan's eyes, but her voice was sharp. "I spent years searching for him. I found the adoption records, the forged documents, the cover-ups. And when I found out about you, I knew you were the key to exposing everything." Emily's breath caught. "So, you used me?" Megan's face darkened. "I didn't have a choice. I needed the truth out. But I never meant for it to get this bad. The people behind this, they're dangerous, Emily. They came after you because I forced their hand." Emily glanced at her parents. Kidnappers or not, they were still the only family she had ever known. And them? You were going to let them die? Megan hesitated. They deserved to pay for what they did to you, but I wasn't going to hurt them. Emily wasn't sure she believed her. Suddenly, the sound of tires screeching outside broke the silence. Rachel, she had called the police. Megan's eyes flashed with panic. No, it's too soon. She turned to run, but Emily grabbed her wrist. You don't get to run, Emily said through gritted teeth. You wanted the truth out? Then face it. Megan yanked free just as the warehouse doors burst open. Blinding lights, police sirens, shouted commands. It was over. The aftermath. The police arrested Megan, but her evidence, the real evidence, exposed everything. The adoption ring, the families who had bought stolen children, the powerful figures who had covered it up. Emily's parents were taken in for questioning. Their future was uncertain, but so was hers. She was no longer just Emily. She was the girl who had been stolen, the woman who had fought for the truth, and the survivor who refused to be silenced. As for Megan, her actions had nearly destroyed Emily's life, but in the end, she had also helped her find the truth. Emily stood outside the police station the next morning, staring at the rising sun. Her life had changed forever, but now it was finally hers to live. A new beginning or a tragic end? The storm had passed, but the damage was irreversible. Emily stood at the edge of the city, staring at the skyline that had once felt like home. Now, it was just a reminder of everything she had lost, and everything she had survived. Her parents, the people who had raised her, were facing criminal charges. Megan, the only friend who had both betrayed and helped her, was in custody. The adoption ring had been exposed, its secrets no longer hidden. But justice came at a cost. Her name was permanently tied to the scandal. Some saw her as a survivor, a brave woman who had uncovered a horrifying truth. Others saw her as complicit, someone who had unknowingly lived a life built on someone else's suffering. And then there was the biggest question of all. Who was she now? Emily had spent her entire life believing in a lie. Every childhood memory, every moment of love, every dream for the future. Were they still real, or were they stolen too? She could run, start fresh in a place where no one knew her. Or she could stay, fight for the other children who had been taken, and turn her pain into a purpose. The choice was hers. Taking a deep breath, she turned away from the cityscape and walked forward, not looking back. The past had defined her for too long. Now it was time to decide her own fate. Would she rise from the ashes, or would the weight of the truth crush her? Only time would tell.